Welcome to Femme and Furious, a podcast where pop culture meets a feminine framing. I am your host, Julia Rose Portela, and today I have a lovely interview with author Tricia Copeland, who also goes by the pen name Maria Jane. Now, we talk a lot about her fantasy series and her novella of witches and vampires, and her fantasy and her new adult or more adult books are published under Tricia Copeland, but her romance novels and her YA stuff is published under Maria Jane. So she is an award-winning author of The Perfect Office Pact. Maria Jane believes in the power of love, and her books are filled with fun moments, sweet gestures, surprising turns, and character searching for their happily ever after. If you are craving your next happily ever after read, you can find all of Maria's perfect romances and dive into a mesmerizing love story today at mariajaneromance.com. If, however, you want her fantasy stuff, which is what we are talking about today, of witches and vampires, then you can go over to triciacopeland.com. That'll bring you to her entire published works, where you can find the story that we're talking about today, her novella. She has an entire lore of mythology that she's created, and this is the prequel to the prequel that is called Of Witches and Vampires. So it's a short novella. It's a nice, easy entrance into this world, which we will talk about, and I'm excited for you to hear the interview. Before we get into all of that, let me tell you how you can support and follow the podcast. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You can watch full video breakdowns on YouTube, Substack, and Patreon. If you want community, go over to Patreon. If you want my thoughts about other things that I'm watching, reading, digesting in articles, go over to the Substack. They will all have transcripts, so you will be able to download an episode transcript if you need that for accessibility reasons and whatnot. You can follow the podcast over on Instagram and TikTok at FemmeandFuriousPod. You can send me an email, femmeandfuriouspod@gmail.com. Join the newsletter, Lipstick and Lore, all that good stuff, everything that you need, all in the show notes at all times. Just go and click. It's one single link that will bring you to everything that we talk about here in this opening little snapshot. And of course, anything that we talk about from Tricia today will also be in the show notes. Something I want to include before we dive into our interview, we didn't talk about this in the interview, but I do want to mention it. All of Tricia's books on pre-order are now 99 cents through the release week. So you can find them on Amazon, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited. And without further ado, let's dive into our interview with Tricia. Welcome, Tricia.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. That's okay. A lot of people do say welcome.
Welcome to my home.
So, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to just before we got cut off. Did you say your cat's name is Buffy? Smokey. I was like, that is a real cool name. Smokey's still a cool name, but
Buffy would have been a good name too, but he was already named before we got him.
I got it. My cat, who is my co-host, I have two. One can't be bothered, but every time I start talking on the podcast, my one cat Watson comes in. So co-host Watson is here. Smokey's somewhere in the background hanging out. We've got talk about of witches energy. We've got our familiars with us.
Definitely. He is a regular on my podcast. He slinks by.
I love that. I didn't know you had a podcast. What's your podcast name?
Finding the Magic.
Amazing. So I'm assuming that you dive deeper into maybe some of the stuff that you write about in your books.
I do, but I also host other authors to talk about their books and the inspiration behind them.
That's amazing. So because your book does get into, or this was a novella that I read, but I know that you've published a bunch of other stuff. And so this novella that I read of Witches and Vampires, really interesting kind of subversion of Lilith as like a mythological figure, like mystical figure. And we'll talk about that because I'm curious about it, but also really interesting because she has powers, which is canonically true. But it's so subtle in the way that you talk about her magic and and what she's capable of. So I love that you dive into this with other authors and in your other books, I'm sure.
Definitely. I mean, this came after I wrote it after. So the series is the Kingdom Journal series, and this is like a prequel of a prequel.
Okay.
Actually, and it kind of starts surprisingly enough, the antagonist backstory. It's a little bit of the origin. Sonia is the antagonist in the Kingdom Journals, and I
Okay.
built this whole world about how magic works and where these beings came from. And in my head, as the main series,
Uh-huh.
where Kingdom of Ember starts the Kingdom of Journals, but I didn't really put all of that. I didn't want to dump into the first book of that series. So when people were more interested in the characters and their backstories, that's when I started creating the prequels. And this came out of that.
I love that. So Lilith, I found Lilith to be really interesting across the book. I also, knowing just very little now of what you've just said, knowing that Sonia is the antagonist is so fascinating to me because you're getting these really specific, you're really getting Lilith's backstory. And so, like, Sonia's very basic origin story, essentially. But, Lilith as this like mythological figure, the mother of demons, which she is in this telling, though not in the way that we typically talk about it. And I found it really interesting as a choice because I'm an astrologer. That's like my full-time job. And then like my part-time job is podcasting. But in astrology, your Lilith is actually your dark feminine. And there's and that's how she's portrayed a lot. And this idea of Lilith of witches and vampires is I mean, perhaps not domesticated. I don't think that's maybe the right word, but she's definitely not this like big bad, that we I don't know, or a different type of feminist icon. Lilith I think has become this like feminist, against the patriarchy, but there's something about the way that Lilith is explored in this story that is just a subversion of it. It's like a vein of what we've heard or different mythos. So I was curious about where that came from for you, and how does that then connect to, sorry I'm asking like a lot, but how does that then connect to where Sonia, how does that play into where Sonia gets to be the antagonist?
Right. So I guess a little backstory. The Kingdom Journals is centered around this trinity of witches that has to break a curse on the witch lines.
Okay.
And you learn in the first book that witches are there. You get witch powers or you are a witch because of your heritage. So you have to be born a witch. Well, then, the question comes, how were these creatures created in the first place? Like, how are they sort of human beings or types of human beings walking among us, right? And then, so in my mind, I created this world where the angels originally came down to earth and fell in love, for lack of a better term, if we want to get a little explicit,
Yeah.
had intimate relations with humans, and
Uh-huh.
that is what birthed the witches, right? So they were half angelic, half human children initially when they were first born, but Lilith plays a role in that. But really, she does a little bit go against the patriarchy in the sense that she leaves Adam, she decides to leave the garden, and she accepts her punishment of never being able to be wed or married. That's not to say that she doesn't kind of fall in love, and this happens for her. I mean, this meeting of who she doesn't know is an angel and she doesn't know is a demon, perhaps. She just meets them as human men and she falls in love twice. And that's where we get the origin of the witches. And then conversely, or as well as the vampires, who the witches believe in the story came from the devil or, a demon being. So and we see Lilith raise these children that are very different children, the vampires being the typical, lust for blood, and then the witches being these magical beings that can float objects and heal. And so we get that. And she loves them both, right? Because they're all her children. And she feels very blessed to have these children because she thought she would never have that in her life without being married. So, yeah, it's fun to create and fun to think about. Lilith is just trying to make her happily ever after. She's going to live forever, supposedly. So, you know, she was just doing that.
Yeah. She definitely, you can see like her relationship with Adam is really unfulfilling. And the men that she meets subsequently in the years after definitely are fulfill a different role for her. But I also thought it was so fascinating how quick these demons or vampires sort of like penetrate or like influence the human world because her first child where she discovers this. It's not really hers, it's Eve's. And when she then goes through her first pregnancy, to which she's got a million kids, she's got a lot of kids. But, when she goes through her first pregnancy, she's like, this is similar to, to Azul, Eve's other child. So it's just so fascinating to me. Like, was the intent that it's the same person or just different people that these women both happen to meet across their journey? And it's just a larger, like these creatures are already amok out there in the world.
I guess I left that vague intentionally because, yeah, in my mind, there are more than one evil spirit or evil being who's coming into the human world and deciding to create sort of their army, for lack of a better term, or maybe create their own race amongst the humans. And we don't really know if it's a reaction to the angels doing the same thing, right? Because Lilith is very isolated and she's isolated herself intentionally, so she doesn't really know what other kinds of beings there are
Yeah.
besides the humans that she kind of decided to leave, right?
Yeah.
And she gets a little glimpse of Adam and Eve's world when she is called or summoned by Eve, but she doesn't have, it's fun to think about continuing that story because Sonia is like the antagonist in the Kingdom Journals, and you see her as someone who hates all vampires. So when you think about the fact that she had half siblings that were vampires, then the next question is like, what happened in this, between maybe her siblings, or what happened in her life that made her like so hate the vampires?
Yeah. I was almost shocked because to me, when I'm reading Lilith and her perspective and her journey, I feel like Lilith derives a lot of joy from being a mother or a caretaker and companionship. It's why she leaves Adam to begin with, because it's this very desolate, we must do this, Adam needs a job. He's got to go off and he's doing things out of obligation. At least he is with Lilith. It seems a little bit different with his relationship with Eve, the very little that we get about that. But with Lilith, it seems like she does derive a lot of joy from motherhood. And so she's got these one category of children vampires who grow very, very fast and who leave, presumably early into her journey of motherhood, what is like a couple years for her. People parent for like 20 something years now. I mean, people parent for forever, but you've got kids to at least 20 years in your house, or some sort of, 22 if they're in college or whatever. That's modern. This is then. But this idea that she does take a lot of joy in it. So it's almost very shocking when you get to this part of the novella where there's such hate, animosity between these children, even though they didn't really grow up together, because her children that were vampires are out of the house much faster and kind of off exploring the world. And when they come back, it's like this almost like a betrayal that she's betrayed them. And yet she's just trying to find happiness and contentment and companionship where she can. And I found that really interesting. So I'll be curious to see Sonia's journey and continue on.
Yeah, I did want to give Lilith sort of a happily ever after because I felt like she is portrayed as being dark and evil in so many instances. And I thought, what if she was just a woman wanting to live her life and wanting to have some sort of happiness out of, sort of the lot she'd been given.
Yeah.
And I do think I gave her that. But it's been plaguing in the back of my mind for several years to write, the next part of her story as well as Sonia's. So, I think that's bubbling up to the top.
Oh, I love that. Oh, yeah, security is something that is important to her. That's why she lives so far away from everybody, or at least from the Garden of Eden. And this idea of like her security and so being so isolated and not really knowing what's going on. I love that. And I love that she, at one point she's like, I'm a woman with a child, like living alone with a child, which is like the most, we've got these like mythical figures in like Adam and Eve and Lilith and Michael and, all of these different characters that across mythology. Then you have these like really human sentiments of like, I'm a woman alone living with a child. Like, yeah, security is important to me. So I'll be really curious too, because you get a taste of what her ending is, but you don't really get to walk with her through that journey. You get it more from Sonia's kind of perspective. And now that makes sense to me, thinking about sort of it's not really an epilogue, but sort of how this novella kind of concludes with that tidbit. Sonia kind of walks us into the journey and then walks us out of it. And knowing that now, I'm like, okay, you can see where maybe some animosity is being cultivated because of the actions that are clearly yet to come from Lilith's perspective, but obviously that we know um, from what Sonia tells us.
Right. And I really wanted to imbue that Lilith was teaching all of her children, her vampire children, as well as her witch children, just, the same values that she wanted for herself: love, harmony, connection. And then it is a little bit of a betrayal when some of her children come back and there's that incident. So I'm excited to write that next chapter now, I think.
Yeah. Do you think that, when they're out there, when her vampire children are out there, do you think that they're coming across, well, but are they coming across other vampires and learning sort of what they've maybe missed out on because of the way that they were raised? And that's why there's so much contention when they come back. I mean, part of it, I think, is just like mom had more kids, but that has to be in there. Again, that's a very natural thing that you feel is a love or a connection to, and also like a, hey, I had it made in the shade before you came along, kid, type of deal. But especially Azul, like Azul and Lucius like leave essentially and don't come back. And I had that in the back of my mind, is Lucius showing Azul what he couldn't have with Lilith because of the way that she raised him?
Right. That was very much my intent.
Okay.
And that they find other vampires and they kind of learn who they really are and who, what their food source may have been meant to be and how much stronger maybe they can be because of that. And that maybe she was holding him back. And also when they come back, they may feel some animosity or with Lilith because and a little bit betrayed for their father's sake, right? Because here, Lilith has taken a different quote unquote mate partner
Yeah.
and had more children with it. So, I think all those feelings come into play in that.
Yeah. I love it. I love Lilith. I love her journey. I love her connection to Eve. When I look at Lilith in the way that she is portrayed in this story, she just is somebody to me that wants to connect. And at first it's, I don't want to just connect with Adam. I want to connect with the world at large. And then her relationship with Eve and how that fulfills her. And then then she doesn't really have that anymore and she's alone. And, what it means for her then to discover Lucius or have Azul or, these like early parts of her life where these connections are forged for her and not born out of her relationship with Adam, even though I think her relationship with Eve is very special. But, she sort of has this like curse, truly a curse where she only gets it for these short stints. And so her children leave and her children will continue to leave because that's what children do. It's part of their journey. But, she gets Lucius and she knows that it's fleeting and she kind of talks about like, I realize that he comes and goes. And I just have to accept it because I knew that this was going to be my lot in life. And she goes through it again with Mikhail and what that means for her and this sense of like pushing and pulling. I like to be alone. I like to be secluded in the woods. And of course there's like a larger security reason for that at first with Azul and his protection. But then, it kind of is just like, I like being by myself. I like my cat. I like my herbs. I like the beach right over there. And I resonate with that because same. So I love that she has this, but you could just sense that there's like her loneliness or her desire to connect really does pop off the page. And it's sad when you feel into this story, and then you get Sonia's little, I'm trying not to spoil the ending for people, but you get Sonia's little note at the end where she tells you how this all ends for her. And I just I hope Lilith feels the love through the rest of her journey. I really do hope that she has people that will continue to come in and support her and love her and open her world up a little bit more, and show her a little bit more, because she is such a special character here. She's so direct, and she's very discerning, and two things that I really appreciate in a woman.
Yeah, and those are strong characteristics. They're strong character personalities because and you kind of have this juxtaposition between that and her warmth and her love. And so I like spinning all those into one character.
Yeah, I love that too. So now so this is a prequel to the prequel of a trilogy, a duology. It's a
It's 4 books,
Okay.
so I guess it's like, what is that? Anyway,
So
quad
it's
something.
ongoing.
So right, so the Kingdom Journals is a complete series with 4 books, and then Kingdom of the Damned is the prequel to that, and then Witches and Vampires is sort of the prequel to the prequel. There's also a crossover series where we hear much more about Lilith and what happens later, which is called the Realm Chronicles series, which is a fae fantasy series, but the fairies come help the witches fight Sonia, basically, and the witches conversely help the fairies. And so we do see in the Realm Chronicles series that Lilith is very revered and honored by the vampires, and the vampires that are now present in the year 2020, 2020s, 2025. So that kind of was cool to write as well, that, historically she's being honored by the people, her tribe of people that she originated or sired or partly originated.
Yeah, Mother of Demons. I mean, she's got the name for a reason, This is a part of her story, and I love Lilith across different. I didn't know that this was going to be about Lilith at all when I opened this. So, it was like to my great delight, because Lilith is a mythological figure that I love. I now live in Paris, but well, I'm not there right now, but I live in Paris. And when I had a car, I would always name my car, and my last car that I had before I moved was Lilith. So Lilith is such an important figure. She's important in astrology. She's important in mythology. She's important biblically, which is in there too, and especially Mesopotamian, mythology and whatnot. So she's like across the board, just a character or a figure that women, I think, look to as this like antithesis to the patriarchy. And I love it. She's like a cat lady living alone, with a beautiful view and her herbs, and like, I'm going to make a good meal for myself every night and raise my kids and hang out. And who's this weird guy on this beach? Why is there another weird guy on this beach? Like, I'm waiting. I would like for you to go, but I kind of want you to stay. And I really love her journey. So I can't wait to dive into the other books, because now I'm all amped up. So you have now then an audiobook that is releasing, that's already released, or when is it releasing?
Right. So the Kingdom Journals audiobooks are all out. The Realm Chronicles, the fourth To Be a Fae Rogue, just released. The Realm Chronicles series is finished in paperback and ebook To Be a Fae that came out last July. So the fourth audiobook just released, and the fifth and finale audiobook will come out in the summer. So that's really exciting to get them in that format.
I love that so much. So what are you working on now? Are you still in this universe? You have also other romance novels. You have like a very large body of work. So, what are you working on, or what's like pulling at you right now?
Right. So two things are pulling on me, which is this Sonia story. So I'm kind of forming all that in my head. And then in To Be a Fae, which is the finale in the Realm Chronicles series, I have these, I won't give too much away, but they need, for whatever reason, they gather all these friends that are all different types of beings. And there is a Nyx character, Mia, in that book. I wrote a short story. Hopefully that's coming out in a magazine soon. But she has a role to play in the greater fight against Sonia, and I think I'm going to have a spinoff, which usually happens for me. I'll write a short story, and then that character is stuck in my head. So a Nyx character, for those that don't know, it's a fish shifter character. So I'm just at the beginning of forming like what could be her full length story.
I love it. So this is like a real, not that it wasn't real before, but this is like a real universe for you that you're really exploring. There's a lot of mythology amongst all of these different books and novellas and stories and whatnot that you're creating. So this is like a Westeros level commitment for people, but
It
it's
was.
good.
It's
People like
really,
that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
It's really interesting because it started out very much urban fantasy. The witches and the vampires are in our world. The humans don't know about them, but they're very real and interact with humans all the time. And then when I needed an army to help the witches fight Sonia, I thought, well, who's going to help the witches? It's that fairies. But then I needed a place for the fairies to live. So the fairies actually live under our human world,
I love
and
that.
they in the bed like in the bedrock of the earth. So they get their water and their light from these fairy rings that they open and close, and they can go between the realms. They don't usually. So that Realm Chronicles series feels very much like epic fantasy because they are in this like kind of medieval times. They don't have technology, computers, phones, but it's fun to go back and forth between those worlds because you get kind of this epic medieval feel, but then you come into the human world and you're back into technology. So I've melded those a little bit, kind of crossing genres, so to speak.
I love that. I love anything where I love portal worlds or like they're not always portal worlds, but like when another realm of existence is like intersecting with Earth in some way or humanity in some way. So I love that these fairies live underneath. That makes so much sense, you know, and that they would honestly, when you think about fae or like fairies, probably not interested in technology anyway, you know, they're of the earth. So why would they be interested in these like modern technologies in a way that witches and and vampires, I think, across mythology have modernized in a way that fae and fairies haven't. So I feel like it does make more sense that like a vampire would like try to fit in amongst people, you know. Speaking of Buffy, like you've got but vampires who are literally like they die and they've got their cell phones in their pockets still. So of course Buffy kills them 10 seconds later, but you know that they've modernized in the genre storytelling in a way that like fae and fairies haven't. And I find that really interesting. So I think it makes sense that your fairies would be under the ground and like doing their own thing.
Yes, so my fairies do have wings and they can fly, so that kind of helps them a little bit too. But and their charge, much like the witches, was from the creator that they were supposed to protect the humans from all the evil beings in what I call lower earth or hell. So those fairies live in middle earth and then we live in upper earth. So it's just interesting like to talk about the origins of these different beings and just what part they're playing and what part they're like reinventing for themselves sometimes too in maybe a more modern society ish sort of.
I love that. Do you think vampires are real?
I kind of do.
Me too.
I mean, I can't not believe it now because I think about them like way, way too much for it not to be real. So yeah, I like to believe they are, but
I do
I
too.
haven't met one yet, or I don't know if I have.
I know. I always think about it though. So from somebody who does spiritual work, I would like pass people or like if you're in Target or wherever and you're going to get a mat and everything's like, welcome, come in. And I'm like, I'm not getting that mat. I'm not giving them permission beforehand. Like, you have to get me off the street. But I wish I didn't think about stuff like that, but I really do. I'm like, I will not have a doormat that says come in or welcome or anything like that in some way. I'm like, it could be a a a plain mat or it could have a little picture on it, but I'm like words because they can twist words often, like fae, vampires, they all have like this origin of being able to twist words. And I'm like, I'm not giving them any fodder to come into my home.
You really opened my mind. I have to think more about my doormats now because, yeah, you would traditionally somebody in the house has to like vocally say, "You may come in," but you're right. What if somehow it gets twisted and they can just come in if you have that on your doormat? Thank you.
I feel like especially the Fae are like kings and queens of loopholes. So I'm always like, we don't need that to be a loophole. You stay out there. I feel like anyway, but if a vampire or fae came into my house, I would be like, you could totally kill me. Can we just talk first? Like I have
Right, yeah,
so
just
many
tell me
questions.
all the details first, right?
Tell my family I was totally fine with this. It was fine. I'm like, let me leave them a note. It was okay. Um Yeah, I think they're real, and I do think about it often. I'm like, how often do you think we're brushing up against these sort of mythological figures and how they've modernized, especially witches and witches for sure, but like vampires, fae, I'm always like, we've definitely modernized these stories, particularly with vampires, and I think about it all the time. I'm like, probably have met a couple across the it feels near impossible to think that we haven't. And I always think about like where do stories come from and why do we have certain lore mythology around certain things? Why do we know that you have to invite them in? Like where did that originate from? I know it originated, I'm sure, from somewhere, but if you spam back, but I always think like it's so closely connected to every vampire story that certainly there's weight to it. Like there's proof or something. I don't know if proof is the right word, but I don't know. I think about this stuff all the time, probably too much.
Definitely the same way. I mean, I've read, like, Bram Stoker, like, I don't know if you know, like, in every country, like, he published in, it was, like, a little bit different in every country because sometimes the publishers changed it, sometimes he changed it,
Yeah,
sometimes he had other people write with him, so I re like, a year or 2 ago, I got really into, like, reading every different Bram Stoker from every different country,
I love that.
and yeah, so yeah, I'm kind of a nerd that way too.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so cool. So it's fascinating. And it lends to these stories. I always say stories talk to stories. So when you know a little bit of these mythos, I'm sure it deepens your connection to your characters, to their history, to their ancestry. It's the same as I think, when I hear my grandmother or my father tell a story about my grandparents or something like that, like you hear these stories that just you're connected to them in some way, and yet they have nothing really to do with you other than those are your ancestors. But, it's like it lends its hand to the weight of each story that then comes after it. And there's so many stories about fae and vampires and witches. And it's like these stories are classic and they're able to be, remixed to fit somebody's own exploration of it. And yet they are talking to every other history of the story or the genre itself. And I love that because I think it makes the stories more fascinating. If you've never read the Bible, fine, but you surely know Adam and Eve. So, you could get into a novella like of witches and vampires, and maybe you've never read the Bible, so you have no idea who Lilith is, but you're able to connect with, okay, she's connected to Adam and we know Adam and we know Adam's story. You have to be like literally living under a rock in a Fey world in Middle Earth to not know Adam and Eve. And so, you at least by introducing them as characters here, which like it would be impossible not to, you get this weight of a story because we're not following Adam and Eve, whose story we've followed again and again and again, but we're following Lilith, who's diverted on her own path and doing her own thing. And yet these people intersect with her. And we have an awareness of their stories. So now we have a deeper connection to Lilith that way, even if you had no idea biblically who Lilith was. And I think that that's what makes stories so rich and fascinating.
Yeah, it was really fun for me to kind of explore like what Adam and Eve may be doing and how they may be interacting with other people and then, how Lilith was reacting to that and what Lilith would do. What would I mean she had such a good connection with Eve, so that strain needed to stay strong and kind of keeping to her character that way, but then thinking about the greater world when Lilith kids go out into the world and see for themselves too.
Yeah. And she has so much integrity. Like the second that she gets message that Eve needs her, she's there. She raises somebody else's child to protect them and keep them safe. And she feels bonded, of course, right away with Azul, but it's also her connection with Eve that drives so much of that. And you get later in the story, she's talking to Mikhail and he says something along the lines of like, why don't you use magic for that? And she's like, I like to keep my body strong. Like, I don't really need to be using magic for that. And so she's even got integrity with like the power that she uses and the integrity of like, we don't kill. We have other sources of blood for you to get that, and by the way, there's a difference between killing the antelopes out there and killing our cat. So like, there's a fine line for her that she walks in her values and her integrity and how that's explored, versus this again, this like mother of demons, like, kind of effed off from the Garden of Eden and does her own little Pandora's thing versus, what we really get in this story, which is a much, much stronger in her own alignment and integrity and how that kind of plays out. So I love her in this book. I can't wait to read more about her.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to get across that she just loved life, right? Or loved creation and whatever that life or creation looked like. It was still life or creation. It was still beings made after, formed in some semblance of a creator or the creator of, the giver of life, right? So I wanted to kind of show that and show like love for all beings, really.
Yeah, I think you did a great job because
Thank
I
you.
loved her story. I loved reading it. I had such a great time with all of these characters. I can't wait to go on. I knew certainly when I first opened the book, I was like, oh, this must be a novella because it was only like, it's only 36 pages or
Right.
something like that. It's not that long. So for anybody who's even looking to get into this world where there's a lot of books and a lot of lore and mythology that you're going to have to explore, this might be a really great place for them to start because it's gonna walk you into this story maybe chronologically, but it can allow you to have a deeper sense of who these characters are before you even get to especially if Lilith is popping up in different books as well. So, before you even get to like the meat of I'm sure the meat being like what Sonia's journey is, but or the more urban aspects of it. But yeah, this I think is a really great introduction for people because it's really easy to dive into most of the characters because if you know the Bible at all, even if you're not religious, if you've ever heard of the Bible, you know what's going on in this book, which is a really nice introduction for people and allows people to get into the story really easily. I love that. Will this have its own audiobook too, or is it like is it not worth it because it's a novella? I don't really know how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they definitely could. It would be pretty easy and not very expensive now that you mention it. That's definitely something to think about. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it because it was so short, but on the other hand, maybe I should
Yeah.
because it is so short, right?
Or even having it as like a little podcast, like a mini
Right.
series, 2 or 3 episodes, having someone come on and do something like that on your podcast so that you can get it out that way too, if
That would be super fun. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm chock full of them. I love an audiobook, so I really do. I like to read I like to eyeball read something first and then usually listen to it, and I usually will pick up different stuff each time, but I'm like the queen of I have a Kindle. I know e-readers are like not everyone's favorite thing, but I um love to highlight and take notes on my Kindle because then like now I can come back to it and really have it without having to open a book. So when you're podcasting, it just makes it easier. But yeah, I've been a Kindle fan way longer than that. Pretty much when we hit COVID, I was like, I read way too much for me to be able to financially sustain a pandemic without being trying to read my way through this. And that was my first time in 2020 when I got an e-reader and it's changed my life because now I feel like I take so much more notes about a book or connect to it so much more. And I really loved this. But yeah, something tiny like this you could do just as like a podcast series because I know it does change my experience when I listen to something or I have somebody's voice in mind, especially on a reread because I mean, I don't know how many of your people are rereading stuff, but I will read something, then listen to it, and then like when the next book comes out or whatnot, like go through it again. But now I've got a different voice in my mind. And it enhances my experience so much. So I love that you have audiobooks to kind of complement all of these. because I think it does really change what you experience when you're going through your reading journey.
You are totally, like, making my year already.
Oh, good. I'm so
I
glad.
am so excited that you love that book, and yeah, I feel the same way. I read paperbacks, I read ebooks, I listen to audiobooks, and when I'm preparing for the next book, I'll listen to my other audiobooks in the car just to, like,
Yeah.
completely immerse myself in those worlds, and I just love all the different types of media. I mean, my husband only gives me so many bookshelves, so I am limited.
A Kindle does help. It does. I really are your books on Kindle Unlimited? Are they on
Yes.
Kindle? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's also just for people listening, a great place to go and check them out too. And like I Amazon owes me money. Like it's like the one time I'm like, I'm really giving Amazon a run for their money with how much I read on Amazon. But I know that authors also who have their books on there also I've seen so much about the benefit of people actually reading those Kindle Unlimited books. So I do try to to go where I can and make a difference for the author because you've put so much work into this. I mean, you have a whole and this is it's not even like this series in this world is your only thing. Like you have other books that we haven't even really talked about, but you do have other books. They are romance books. Are so if anyone's looking for some Valentine's Day stuff, what would you recommend?
So if you go to the Perfect Romance series, well, I guess they're right now there are 2 books out. I'm re-releasing the first 2 books under the pen name Maria Jane. So right now, As Close to Perfect and Perfect Office Pact are out. Perfect, Perfect Always are re-releasing in now I have to get it straight, April and May, and then the newest, the 5th book will come out in June. So that's a good series if you like light, fun romance, you don't want to think about witches or vampires or dying or any of those things, then those are the kind of fun happily ever afters. Not that the witches and the vampires aren't fun, but
Witches are
definitely
kind of
a
fun.
lighter side.
Yeah. I think vampires by nature and sometimes witches, it depends. Witches, it depends on how the witches are being portrayed, but I think vampires by nature are sexy. So I feel like there is something in vampire lore that like, you know, like the vampire Lestat, you're kind of like, okay, hello. I mean, I think that there it's a part of the mythology, so I feel like fine if people that doesn't have to be how your books go, you know, but I do know that you had other books, so I wanted to mention them because you have a ton of published works. When do you stop? When do you
I don't
take a
know,
break and go to rest?
yeah, I'm a little bit obsessed. All my characters sort of live in my head, but yeah, it's fun. I love creating the world and it just it's part of who I am now, I think.
I love it so much. Where is the pen name coming from? Or
So
is that
Maria
like a
Jane, yeah, so I wanted to set because most of my fantasy is a young adult fantasy. Kingdom of the Dams is more adult, and as you read, Of Witches and Vampires is more adult reading. You have adult relationships, but the Kingdom Journals and the Realm Chronicles is very YA. I mean, somebody who's 12 years old could pick it up, and I wouldn't have a problem with my 12-year-old reading them. There's only romance you get is sweet pecks on the lip. Yeah, sweet
yeah,
kisses. So I really didn't want someone who was reading that and wanting that YA experience to jump over to my romance and go, "Oh, there's some sexy scenes here."
yeah.
So I created that Maria Jane pen name, and it's really in honor of my sister and my grandmother. So my sister's name is Marie, and my grandmother's name is Jane. So I kind of put those together.
I love that so much, and I love that it's born out of familial connection. How amazing. All right, my dear. Well, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. What an incredible
Thank
book. I can't
you.
wait to dive into the rest of the series. I'll be giving you my notes, I'm sure, along the way.
Well, please do, because then that'll give me some more jumping off points for these characters.
Yeah, I'll be listening to the audiobooks alongside. I love an immersive read. I love doing both in my ears. I'm doing that now with The Hobbit. I'm trying to expand my token lore. I'm like, I understand the references when I'm reading, but I've never read the books. So it's time. I was like, it's time. This year, it's time. So I feel like I try to do one big, like, I'm going to do a deep dive into this mythos or this lore. I'm starting with The Hobbit, but I've been doing an immersive read, which is really fun. So I have a feeling now that I know that these all have audiobooks. We'll do another immersive read. I'll be downloading the books. Where can people find you? Where can people find you? Where can they find your books? All of this will be in the show notes for everyone listening, but just so you can share with them.
Great. Yes. So my website is triciacopeland.com. If you want to go to my directly to my romance, you can go to mariajaneromance.com. But triciacopeland.com takes you to everything. I do have 2 free short stories, a romance and a YA fantasy. If you want to go to my website and sign up for the newsletter. All my books are on Amazon, Kindle Unlimited. The Kingdom Journals audiobooks are wide, and the Rome Chronicles audiobooks are just on Audible.
Okay. I love that so much. Thank you so much, Tricia.
Well,
This is
thank you.
amazing. Thank you for sharing Lilith with me. I love her and I will cherish her. And I can't wait to revisit her story along the way. I can't wait to see what happens with Sonia. Now I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to go download these on Kindle.
Oh my goodness, you have made my year. I have to say, Julia,
Oh,
I so appreciate you reading and being so invested in the story. It
thank you
really
so
makes my
much. Yeah, it
yeah.
was a pleasure. Easiest read. I loved it so much. It's a great, great, easy. If someone's looking to this interview and they are looking for a jumping off point, even like just to get interested in fantasy, like fantasy can be really difficult for some people, but this is a really great novella. Like I said, it was only 36 pages. And so it's not gonna, sometimes the size of fantasy can be like really for me, I'm like, that looks a little short, but for other people who are not used to it, this is a really great introduction, I think, into the genre, because you're familiar with most of the people, most of the lore, and then it allows them, I think, as a gateway to go deeper. So I think this is a really good entry point for a lot of people who might be genre curious, and want to dive in a little bit deeper. Because this, I think, will give them a really good understanding of like, okay, this is what I can come to expect, but on a larger scale with different people or different stories. And so I'm excited, and I'll be sending you my updates along the way as I go through all of these books. I'm really excited. I'm glad there's many of them because I love to be lost in a world for a while.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to get lost in many worlds. So thank you so much. I mean, it just means a lot to have someone like love my books.
My absolute pleasure. Come on anytime. As you're releasing stuff, as things are coming out, definitely come back. We'll chat. And I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to see what you put out next.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Bye. Thank you so much, Tricia, for being on the show. I love her enthusiasm for this world, her characters, everything that she has built. I can't wait to dive deeper into the story and this lore. Of course, you can find all of the ways that you can follow Tricia, purchase her books, all of that stuff down in the show notes. We'll be back on Tuesday doing a quickie episode on season 1 of Exo Kitty. This is one of my favorite YA shows, and it's coming back in April. So we will do season 1 recap now, and then the show comes back on April 2nd. Now it's on Netflix, so I have a feeling it'll be a binge drop either in 1 or 2 parts. So that'll either be 1 or 2 episodes that we're doing. But if you've never watched Exo Kitty and you like YA, can't recommend it enough. I love it, and I can't wait to see what happens this season. I love Kitty. She's one of my favorite characters, and we've seen her before. If you are a Jenny Han fan, meaning you watched The Summer I Turned Pretty or you read the books The Summer I Turned Pretty, she also wrote the books To All the Boys I've Loved Before, which got a movie trilogy over on Netflix. And this is Lara Jean's sister, Kitty, who was in those shows, now is getting her own series. The series is great. The vibes are vibing. If you are somebody who liked a story like The Summer I Turned Pretty, you will love Exo Kitty. We're going to do a season 1 recap. And then let's look ahead. So I just want us to be on the same page about where we're going, okay? Starting in March, we are doing The Boys of Tommen. The first book in that series is Binding 13. We are going chapters 1 through 10 on March 3rd. So if you haven't started reading, start reading so you can catch up and listen by the time we get to March 3rd. It's a really great series. I can't recommend it enough, but I do want to let you know it is going to be Sad Girl Spring. We are doing Binding 13 and then we are going right into Euphoria. So the Exo Kitty is a really nice little break for us because those are some heavy properties that will be bringing us through the spring. But I'm really excited to be doing Binding 13. It's one of my favorite books. The Boys of Tommen is one of my favorite series. I cannot wait to deep dive it with you guys. And it needs a deep dive. You can't you can't just read these books without deep diving them. There's so much that's happening. So I'm excited to explore that with all of you. I love you all so, so much. I will see you on Tuesday for our XO Kitty exploration. And until then, go check your doormats and make sure you're not unintentionally inviting any vampires in.